Hello and welcome. My name is Tara DiGiulio, and I am the Education and Outreach Coordinator for the Brain Injury Association of Pennsylvania's Opioid Training Initiative. Today, we will be completing a training about 30 minutes in length about use of the MindSource Symptom Questionnaire, a self-report tool used to identify areas of concern and provide follow-up strategies via tip sheets to address them. Please ensure you have downloaded the symptom questionnaire to follow along. Thank you for joining me. In this training, we will cover the symptom questionnaires administration, scoring, and use of information generated for future treatment. The MindSource Symptom Questionnaire is divided into 9 sections: memory concerns, delayed processing, attention problems, inhibition and impulsivity problems, physical sensory motor problems, language problems, organization problems, mental inflexibility, and emotional problems. Each section has a set of questions answered on a 5-point scale, from I don't have this problem at all to I have this problem and am extremely bothered by it. Scores are then calculated using the highest point sections, resulting in a list of strategies and interventions, also known as tip sheets, to address those areas that were scored the highest. This information can be used to help guide treatment. To administer, the therapist simply hands the participant a pencil and the questionnaire to complete independently in session. If there are questions, providing examples and scenarios can be provided for better understanding. Please ensure you have downloaded and printed to follow along the link provided in this website. Lastly, I'd like to acknowledge our funding source. This project was funded by the Pennsylvania Department of Health Title V Maternal Child Health Services Block Grant. Prior to using the MindSource Symptom Questionnaire, it is important that an individual has first been screened for a history of brain injury. Though there are many tools to do so, we have chosen to do an asynchronous training on use of the Ohio State University TBI identification method. You should first watch this screening tool housed on our website prior to moving forward to the MindSource Symptom Questionnaire training. It is important to note that not all episodes of brain injury lead to cognitive impairments. Though an individual may have screened positive on the OSU, meaning that they have been identified as someone who has exhibited a traumatic brain injury, they may not exhibit cognitive impairments demonstrated on the MindSource questionnaire. It is important to use secondary screening to identify those individuals who have neurocognitive challenges. Neurocognitive testing can be used to look at the likelihood of effects of a brain injury, and the symptom checklists can also provide insight into the functional day-to-day problems people report, which are likely associated to brain injury. Neuropsychological screening is a good tool to use when professionals need more in-depth understanding of the cognitive impairments an individual is experiencing. Once these deficits are identified, targeted interventions can be applied. Additionally, screening can lead to eligibility of brain injury-specific resources in some states. There are a variety of screening batteries that can be implemented. It is important to note that neurocognitive testing can only be done by or under the supervision of an appropriately licensed professional. At times, this may be difficult to access. It is important to consider the use of commercial health insurance to request a neuropsychological evaluation. In addition, for those still in school, A neuroeducational evaluation can be used to assess a student for memory and executive dysfunction. Symptom checklists can be used to supplement information gained through formal neuropsychological testing, or as an additional source of information when those assessments are not feasible. Symptom checklists rely on an individual's self-report of their perceived functional problems. Today, though we are discussing the MindSource questionnaire, there are other options for gathering this information. It is important to note that when using a self-report tool, there are limitations. With a brain injury, individuals may struggle with self-identification and self-awareness regarding their limitations. It is important to take this information into account when developing a treatment plan. The MindSource Symptom Questionnaire was developed by a team of psychologists in Colorado. There are adult and juvenile versions, both used to identify real-life problems. As previously mentioned, symptoms associated with brain injury covered by this questionnaire include memory, information processing, attention, disinhibition and impulsivity, physical sensory motor issues, language, organization, mental inflexibility, and emotional regulation. Administration of the MindSource Symptom Questionnaire can be given to anyone with a positive screen on the OSU or with a known history of brain injury. This self-report tool can be done independently. However, the administrator should make sure that the individual has been read the directions and understands each bubble clearly. The individual should be able to read well enough to answer the questions on their own. However, it is okay if the inventory is read with the individual. The individual should be considering symptoms within the past 2 months when perceiving each symptom. When providing the MindSource questionnaire to an individual to complete independently, it is important that the administrator express that how much the problem has bothered them in recent weeks be marked with one of the following. I don't have this problem at all. I have this problem, but it never bothers me. I am slightly bothered by this problem. I am very bothered by this problem. I am extremely bothered by this problem. Often during administration, people will ask questions. Does this apply? I'm not sure how this applies. I simply ask people to think of a time in their life when that symptom may have bothered them. And in recent weeks, how much has it impaired or influenced their ability to complete a task? And then choose the rating based on that outcome. In understanding the interpretation of the MindSource questionnaire, it is first essential to understand the criteria that individuals choose when rating the severity of the symptom. Individuals have the option to choose from, I don't have this problem at all, I have this problem, but it never bothers me, it bothers me slightly, very, or extremely. Of these 5 criteria, those with symptoms 50% in the mild or higher range, no matter if other statements in that same category were marked as not a problem or a problem but does not bother me, or those that are marked with at least one extreme in a category section indicate the use of a tip sheet. Now we are going to review the criteria for the MindSource questionnaire using each category at a time, reading each question that an individual would complete under that subheading. Memory concerns. Individuals would answer the following questions using the 5-point rated scale we've previously reviewed. The following are questions under this category. I lose or misplace important items. Examples: keys, wallet, papers. I forget what people tell me. I forget what I've read. I lose track of time. I forget what I did yesterday. I forget things I've just learned. I forget meetings and appointments. I forget to turn off appliances. Example, an iron or the stove. Under delayed processing, individuals would answer the following questions. I have a hard time following conversations. I can remember only 1 or 2 steps of instructions or directions. I take too long figuring out what someone is trying to tell me. Next, under attention problems, individuals would answer the following questions. I have a hard time concentrating. I am easily distracted. I have a hard time concentrating in noisy environments. I have a hard time following conversations. I have a hard time concentrating on challenging tasks. For example, work or paying bills. Next, under inhibition problems, inclusive of disinhibition and impulsivity, individuals would answer under the following questions. I say things without thinking. I do things without thinking. I do not follow directions. I dominate conversations. For example, I talk more than the other person in a conversation. I interrupt when others are speaking. Under physical and sensory motor problems, individuals would score the following. My body hurts a lot of the time. I don't get enough sleep. I feel tired. I am bothered by light. I have a hard time focusing my eyes. I have a hard time telling how near or far away objects are from me. Next, under language problems, individuals would rate the following. I have a hard time understanding what people tell me. I have a hard time understanding what I've read. I have a hard time finding the right word when speaking. I have a hard time getting people to understand what I am trying to say. I have a hard time finding the right words when writing. Symptoms under organization problems are the following. I have a hard time keeping to a schedule. I have a hard time deciding which of my daily tasks I should do first. I have a hard time starting tasks. I have a hard time switching from one task to another. I have a hard time completing tasks. I have a hard time completing tasks correctly. I have a hard time completing tasks on time. For example, paying bills, work, or activities. Mental inflexibility. The following are questions under this subheading. I have a hard time figuring out how to handle new problems. I have a hard time changing my mind when things change. I have a hard time learning new ways of doing things. I don't understand why people do things differently than me. And lastly, emotional problems. The following are statements that are to be rated. I feel anxious. I feel irritated. I cry easily. I feel depressed. I feel traumatized. I overreact to things. Once an individual has completed the symptom questionnaire, tip sheets are generated based on those categories that scored the highest. Again, those that had at least one extreme or those that were at least 50% mild or greater. These tip sheets are not a diagnosis. They simply create framework for future brain injury education and counseling. They're suggestions, strategies to help compensate for problems that an individual is likely experiencing in areas like school, work, or independent living. In order to better understand the use of tip sheets, we're going to explore an example. In this example, the individual would have marked that they are struggling with memory problems.
Memory is the brain's ability to retain previously experienced sensation, information, and ideas. Memory impairment is the inability to remember bits of information or skills and can lead to a decreased ability to quickly process information like language and sensory input. Memory impairments can result in having trouble following conversations, taking too long to respond, or remembering only one or two steps when provided with instructions. People with memory impairments can appear spacey or may seem to be in a mental fog. They might be slow-moving or lethargic. In community mental health settings, people with memory impairments may appear disinterested, as they likely forget important appointments, even if they are meaningful. The use and repeated practice of the following suggestions that can be found on a tip sheet is helpful. Number 1, provide your client with a basic organization system, like a folder, calendar, or planner, where important information and paperwork can be stored. Encourage them to make a habit of keeping the information in one designated spot or location within their environment. 2, deliver information in as many modalities as possible. For example, if having a conversation, make a print version of the topics available and encourage the client to write down information. Providing them with multiple reminders of dates and tasks is important. Number 3, use visual imagery techniques when reading. This can help increase retention. Having them follow along with pictures or descriptions can help the individual remember written information. And lastly, number 4, when having difficulty keeping track of time, setting up cues or reminders, maybe with alarms, may be helpful. To help an individual keep a track of time during meetings, it is useful to develop cues that an individual can stay mindful.
Additional memory strategies include having an individual bring paper to take notes during an event, or using the Notes application on their phone. Taking notes during an event will help to improve memory. Number 6, encourage clients to complete tasks that challenge their memory, such as asking them to memorize names or numbers. This may be helpful for recent information. Number 7, make sure when important meetings are scheduled, they are immediately put into a client's calendar or phone application along with appropriate notes. For example, I have a physician appointment on this day at this time for this problem. You may even help them to make a list of items that they wish to discuss with their physician for later recall. Encourage them to set alarms for this appointment and correct them immediately if they repeat back information incorrectly. Number 8, poor sleep can contribute to memory impairment. Please review the attached sleep checklist with your client to help improve better sleep habits. And number 9, consider scheduling regular appointments that fall on the same day and time each week. A regular routine is best for recall. The use of tip sheets for professionals is a simple suggestion for interventions and adaptations to facilitate treatment successfully. They're often a lead-in for discussion around real-life problems. For example, how has your memory affected you this week? Let's talk about and problem solve the use of strategies that might be helpful. Because the MindSource Symptom Questionnaire is self-report, it is important to note some limitations. Individuals may not be experiencing increased demands in certain settings. This is especially true for those in residential treatment, prison, or even in the throes of addiction. Where routine, structured activities happen with consistency, there is less room for error or difficulty. Individuals may not be aware of their problems in these situations, or have the insight to even understand. Individuals may not want to admit their struggles and therefore do not self-report. The use of the symptom questionnaire as a dialogue starter is often a great place for the therapist and individual to start. Following the completion of the OSU TBI ID, the symptom checklists allows individuals to coordinate what injuries have occurred, and what potential outcome or symptomology they might be experiencing. What does all of this mean? Is often a question a lot of people will ask. What this means is these are symptoms or barriers that will need treatment as we move forward. They may or may not be related specifically to an incident or brain injury. However, they are areas of treatment that are worth exploring. Let's use an example. This is Jacob. Jacob is an 18-year-old male who was recently admitted to a county treatment facility. Jacob was initially interviewed using the Ohio State University TBI identification method, also known as the OSU. He identified several episodes in his life that may have caused a brain injury. He stated falling off of the porch as a toddler, hitting his head and splitting it open on the forehead. He was treated and released from the hospital. At age 11, Jacob recalled hitting his head on a pipe in the crawl space of his home. He remembers seeing stars and having a cut. He was not treated medically for this incident. Most significantly, Jacob reported he sustained a concussion in the last few years of his life. He reports playing basketball with a cousin, getting elbowed in the temple, and dropping to the floor. In this instance, he hit his head on the concrete. Peers report that he lost consciousness for several minutes. When Jacob woke up, he vomited and was disoriented. He was diagnosed with a concussion and then released from a local hospital. Jacob reports having significant symptoms such as headache, photosensitivity, and problems with attention, memory, and balance, which lasted for many weeks. He reported that he missed 45 days of school that year, but that he never followed up with a concussion specialist as recommended. Since that injury, Jacob has also reported that he has had falls from his dirt bike, which often left him dazed. Jacob also reports in his nearest arrest that he got his head stuck up against the police car, hitting it several times. This left him dazed. When asked about symptoms related to overdose, Jacob did recall 2 times where he required Narcan from an opioid overdose. Jacob's mother also provided consent for this assessment, and she corroborated that yes, Jacob has had 2 overdoses. She also recalled the time that Jacob fell off of the porch. She stated that these several instances often affected his grades at school. She noticed increased problems with attention and concentration and depression throughout elementary school. Jacob stated that he had an individualized education plan, an IEP, and that he had been diagnosed with a disability, ADHD. Most recently, he had been attending technical school through a local program with the intention of becoming a flight nurse. Since his concussion, grades had reportedly declined dramatically. In fact, school had recently held a meeting with Jacob and his father to discuss and implement some extra supports. These were never truly implemented, as Jacob's arrest followed shortly thereafter. Jacob reported and exhibited a number of symptoms consistent with brain injury, including recurrent headaches, sensitivity to light, slow processing, difficulty processing and switching tasks, forgetfulness, cognitive overwhelm, cognitive fatigue, poor initiation, balance disturbance, and depression. He also reporting having difficulty regulating his sleep, stating that he is tired most of the time. Jacob states that he becomes increasingly depressed since his injury, and that he has lost hope about his future. He reported that he had not been in trouble with the law and that he had not been involved with probation prior to his most recent arrest. In response to his being identified as having a history of brain injury and significant cognitive impairment, Jacob expressed both relief and a glimmer of hope when completing the OSU. He stated repeatedly that he knew something was wrong, but he could not figure out what was happening. He had many questions that would make things better and how he could move forward. He was hopeful for his future. Jacob's good self-awareness was very useful in helping him to start thinking about possible solutions to his problems. It was also critical that other treaters were aware, that resources were brought to bear, And in the end, we started to look at the prior goals and figure out what was possible to do now. Jacob's self-report on the symptom questionnaire, in combination with the OSU, led for a promising treatment goal plan. As in Jacob's story and many others, a history of brain injury can impact an individual's capacity to use the treatment they are provided. Common problems when those are suffering from brain injury are the impact or ability to attend, process, remember, use, and apply treatment. Brain injury also impacts the insight and self-awareness, as well as emotional regulation that an individual is capable of. These problems are organic in nature, often physical and not willful. There are interventions and resources that can be effective in these situations. If you want to know more, here's how. The Pennsylvania Department of Health has a grant which can provide training to professionals working with those in substance abuse settings, as well as training to professionals who are likely to come in contact with individuals with brain injury. We offer technical assistance consultation to organizations who are interested in developing protocols to identify those individuals with a history of brain injury and become familiar with the relevant resources. Please feel free to reach out to the Pennsylvania Department of Health or the Brain Injury Association of Pennsylvania for more information. We are here to help. Our current training will allow you to understand how to screen for brain injury, how to assess neurocognitive challenges, ways to adapt treatment for individuals with neurocognitive challenge in addition to a substance misuse disorder, and brain injury resources. If you are interested in learning more, please contact Monica Vaccaro, the Brain Injury Association of Pennsylvania Director of Programs. She can be contacted by email at vaccaro@viapa.org. For further information, please feel free to reach out to the Brain Injury Association of Pennsylvania's website, the Department of Health's website, contact the toll-free Brain Injury Resource Hotline for individuals, providers, or those looking for treatment for themselves, as well as the Pennsylvania Department of Health's line. All of these resources are available to help guide future treatment and answer any questions that you may have. We thank you for your time in completing this training.